Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to talk about a question that I get very often, and that's the topic of, are retro game prices about to crash? Is there some bubble that's about to burst and suddenly retro games are going to become more affordable? Is there going to be some kind of cataclysmic event that causes game prices to come down? I'll try my best to kind of address all these things, but let's first talk about the elephant in the room. Of course, I'm going to be a little biased in a way, like many others would be on this topic. I'm sitting in a game room filled with a bunch of retro games. Of course, I don't want to see my collection suddenly plummet in value, but the way that I look at this is, despite making much content over the years talking about the value of games, the price of what your games are, and stuff like that, it I don't sit here solely focusing on the price of games. At the end of the day, I buy these games to enjoy them and to play them, and because of my love and passion for collecting games. If I wasn't passionate about collecting games, I wouldn't still be here 17, 18 years later on YouTube still making content about collecting games. I would have been out long ago. I would have been done with it. It would have been a fad. But when I pick up a game for $10, $20 all those years ago, I don't really sit there thinking to myself like, man, it's so awesome that this is now worth $100. And then suddenly if that game that was once worth 10 is now worth 100 and then it crashes back down to 20 or $30 in the future, if that were to happen, I wouldn't be too bothered by it because I know at the end of the day, I paid a reasonable price for it. I had my fun with the game and the price came down. Would it be really unfortunate to see game prices crash? It absolutely would. But here's why I don't think we're going to see a huge market crash is because unlike collectibles like trading cards, for those of you that keep up with the trading card market with like Pokemon, you know that it was fairly gradual and then suddenly in 2020, 2021, things went crazy because a bunch of new people got into the hobby. A bunch of people that were in the investing side, in the like they're collecting sealed boxes, they're getting into it just for the sole purpose of making money off of it. While that does happen with video games has been a really, really gradual uh, incline over the years, right? I was back there in 2008 seeing people's interest and love for retro games build from the beginning. I think 2008, the beginning of YouTube, 2006, but more so 2008 to 2010 is when retro game collecting really started to take off. And it wasn't like just this thing that you had to go onto an obscure forum back in the day to find other people that collected games. And over those years, more and more people came into the hobby. People left the hobby, whether that's due to them thinking it was for them and then they decide it's not really their thing to collect games, or maybe they can't afford it and they go the route of emulation and sell off their game collection. But there's always a huge incline all these years of new people coming into the hobby. And while people are leaving, which could cause a crash, I think there's more people than ever coming in touch with their childhood, wanting to relive the games that they grew up with. And a lot of this does have to do with the current market, modern games moving more towards digital. We all know, we've heard it endlessly, right? Digital games. I mean, at this point, we're not even sure what the next Xbox is going to do. Are there going to be physical games? Is it digital only? Is the console like $1,200? What's PlayStation doing? What's Nintendo doing with these game key cards? There's a lot of uncertainty in the future of modern games. So a ton of people are coming back to retro. Not only do you get to own a piece of history in a physical, tangible game, but in a lot of cases, it's something that you fondly remember from your childhood. And nostalgia is a very strong thing. But people aren't just buying these games for nostalgia, they're buying them because these games are fantastic. A lot of the older games you don't get to experience anymore. There's a lot of genres and uh, types of games within those genres. Like I always like to use 3D platformers as an example. It can be a little difficult to find a nice 3D collectathon platformer these days. So a lot of people go back and they buy the old platformers, the older turn-based RPGs. While we have newer RPGs that are using turn-based combat, like a lot of pixel-based games and games like Expedition 33, there's just something really comfy and amazing about playing a PS1 RPG that we really don't get, PS1 style RPG that we really don't get too much these days. So because I think there's just so many people coming back into the hobby for the first time or revisiting it, I just really don't foresee some kind of sudden burst or fall off that would cause a drop in prices. Like if we just really sit and think, do we really think a game like Panzer Dragoon Saga, which currently sits around $1,000, will suddenly become $500 or $300? What would have to happen for that to occur? Well, one thing that I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about is something like disc rot. It's something that's been talked about for many, many years. And in my opinion, it's a lot of empty words. Disk rot, I'm sure, does exist if you store your games in really terrible conditions. Super humid, super hot, changing temperatures, keeping your games right next to the sun or by a window in a basement. But if you're storing your games in a safe way, away from those kind of conditions, I personally think disk rot is something that we don't have to worry about. I'm sure there's a lot of evidence on the contrary, but I really do believe that for the most part, our games should be fine as long as they're kept appropriately. But something like that would cause a sudden crash. And if it comes down to that, a console like Sega CD or Sega Saturn, which a lot of people speculate the CD uh, software is not really meant for the long term, yeah, that would cause a huge crash. If there was suddenly a ton of collectors, ton of evidence that your games were becoming valueless, they're going to try and get rid of them while they still can. But even in those instances of those few consoles, if that were to happen, personally, I don't really believe in disk rot. I've talked about this too. That's like its own separate video. I think a lot of that is it, when people make these videos saying, hey, your collection's going to be worthless with disk rot soon, that's going to get a lot of attention, a lot of clicks, right? If you were to tell everybody your collection's going to be fine, don't worry about it, disk rot isn't real, no one's going to really click into that. But if you tell people your collection is going to be rotted and growing these like mold spores and like the disc is just rotting away and your collection is going to be worthless, like that's going to get a lot of clicks, it's going to get a lot of attention. So if you get what I'm saying here, sometimes negativity is like the most prosperous thing on YouTube. So outside of something like the software failing, I really don't see some kind of crash because I've seen it with myself. Any of you that have been to game conventions, if any of you have gone to Portland Retro Game Expos or any local convention, you just see how many people flood these places. Families bringing their kids, kids getting into retro games. It's just like these places are more crowded than ever. And I just don't see suddenly enough people dropping off from interest in retro games to really affect prices. Now, another thing, speaking of kids, a lot of people are probably like, well, a lot of kids these days are into Fortnite and Roblox and that kind of stuff. They're not really caring about retro games. And you wouldn't be wrong. A lot of kids, a lot of the youth, they're not into retro games. They don't really care. Not all of them, though. There's a lot of kids. I mean, look at how well Sonic does. Look at the Mario movie. Look at the Sonic movie. What kids are caring about those movies? The kids that only play Roblox and Fortnite? If they only played Roblox and Fortnite or Minecraft, why would they care about Mario and Sonic? Right? Think about that. They care about Mario and Sonic because they play Mario games. They they play Sonic games. They play all the other games that these movie-based games come out with into theaters. So there's a lot of interest. I think these movies are actually a key component as to evidence of the future generations growing up and maybe caring about older games in those series. A lot of parents in their 30s and 40s that are into retro games are introducing their kids to retro games, making them play stuff like Super Mario World, Sonic the Hedgehog. So I think there's a strong foundation for the future generations to carry the torch of retro games, though I do feel that, yes, it will certainly in decades from now, you know, outside of our lifetimes, future generations, I mean, we'll be gone by then, right? So who really cares what happens to our game collection at that point? But yeah, I mean, we're talking way off in the distant future, I feel like would be the true decline of retro game prices. And while the next 50 years are probably fine for the hardware and the software, yeah, I don't think any of us can really comment about what's going to happen to our game conditions in 100 years, 80 years, 70 years, right? But anyway, that's a topic for a whole different video. So I do another thing about my firsthand evidence is a lot of you know I do a ton of eBay game hunting. I've been doing content for that for many years. Every week, every Saturday, I'm there prowling eBay, checking game prices. I used to make the videos for YouTube. I've looked on eBay for so long, and I pay very close attention to game prices. And when I notice something has a sudden spike and then a sudden fall, there's a good reason for it. So I'm sure a lot of you are very aware that on YouTube, if a huge content creator, we're talking the ones with hundreds of thousands, a million plus subs, makes a video on one or several specific games, it can cause those games to go from being cheap and affordable to very expensive. But the thing that a lot of people don't pay attention to, that I do because I'm constantly looking at these prices, and I'm sure those of you that hunt on eBay, you're very aware of this as well, or if you're not looking at like the charts on price charting, a lot of these games that get really hyped up and see price increases where everybody's like, oh, these prices have got to crash. Well, guess what? game prices have been crashing, but on their own individual basis. It's not so much the industry or the hobby of collecting retro games that's suddenly going to crash. It's more so small little slices of retro collecting that gradually decline. And that's because people get very excited. There's only so much supply and demand for some of these retro games. The prices go way up and then they come down. A great example of this is look at what happened with the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, topics that I've covered on my channel, where the digital storefronts got shut down and prices went way up. Guess what happened to a lot of those games? A lot of them came way back down. So an Xbox 360 game that used to be $20, $30, maybe it spiked up to 100, 150. Remember Fatal Inertia, that racing game that got really expensive during that time, during the 360 apocalypse, as I like to call it? That game came back down to $30 to $40 complete. Can you believe it? Remember all those PlayStation 3 games that got super expensive, like over $100? A lot of those are back down to $30, $40, if not like their normal pricing that they were before everybody started panicking. So when people see these prices, I think what it is, they're not following up. They see the huge price increases because all at once everybody is having their eyes fixated on these moments, right? So when these stores shut down and huge videos come out that get a million views spotlighting a game, they immediately just look at the prices that they suddenly start going for, but then they don't follow up on it a year or two later to see what happens to those prices. And that's kind of why I'm here to help you guys out with that. I love talking about that kind of content, as you know, on the channel. So yeah, crashes happen all the time. It's just that they're micro crashes and they're slow, gradual crashes that happen to specific games. It's just that a lot of us are more so looking at the big picture and not the sort of macro look at things in terms of individual games that are coming down. I think game prices are as low as they've ever been right now. In fact, I think for a lot of consoles, this is the first time in many years, especially since 2020, that you can somewhat reliably and affordably collect for certain retro consoles, or at least while avoiding a certain percentage of the game library and focusing on the percentage of the library that is actually not too bad to collect for at the moment. So anyway, I don't want to ramble on too long, but I hope that this video kind of helped put things into perspective for you guys and my kind of stance on, is there going to be a big, huge decrease in prices? No, I wouldn't panic sell. I would just keep buying the games that you enjoy to play. Don't so much look at them as a financial investment. Don't buy them and think, oh, I hope this game doesn't drop in price suddenly in the future. If you're concerned about something like that, hey, reach out to me. Come to one of my live streams and ask me what I think about the price of a certain game. And I'll do my best to let you know if it's one that you should maybe hold off on buying or buy it now, or is it too late? There's a lot of games where unfortunately it is a little too late, especially the ones that are into the hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Yeah, those ones I think are here to stay. They're sticking for quite a bit. Something crazy would just have to happen for these games that are in the $5 to $1,000+ range to suddenly come back down to being under $100. It's not going to happen. Retro gaming is here to stay. It's a hobby that draws more and more people into it over time. I mean, everybody grew up playing their favorite home consoles, right? And a lot of people are just coming back in for the first time, maybe the second time, or maybe they never left. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.